Gary Gidel is ready to talk about a new rally on Friday for wheat, corn, and soybeans, the U.S. weather, and yet estimates for soybean crushing. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So Jerry, how are you today? Again, we are having a rally for wheat, and the other commodities have followed.
Yes, it's been a this whole week has been a choppy affair here. Earlier in the week, we had commentary. First from the UN envoys and other people in that area saying, "Oh, Russia, let's get something worked out here to get some various, some various food out of Ukraine and that type of thing." And then it's maybe not. And then yesterday the Russians brought it up and say, "Oh yeah, we'd love to open it up if you just let all the sanctions go and all that about energy and everything else." And of course, that really doesn't fit the bill here at this point. And also, there's a lot of caution about what Vladimir Putin and the Russian officials really are thinking. If it's you get it, out of the port there, and then you get it halfway across the Baltic and you shoot it down. So definitely lots of caution and definitely lots of issues, particularly in the wheat market this week, because the fact that we have after quite a few weeks here, a little opening in the northern plains, which is going to probably jump some of these crops up that way. But the biggest problem is that it's going to be closing very quickly this weekend.
Yes, and how do you think the oil prices is impacting the grain markets at this point? They're $115 a barrel.
Well, that's definitely a backbone situation here that provides some support to the general commodity market from that standpoint, no doubt. And interestingly enough, on a traditional basis, usually the highest gasoline prices in the US every year are the ones going into summer and primarily going into the Memorial Day weekend. So things uh, seem to follow a pattern in that we really haven't, we haven't shot up dramatically in that we've just been a firm tone here in the energies, but it is definitely giving it some type of general idea of support at times. But the difference between what's going on in the fundamentals of corn and planting and things like that. We don't have all the issues that Ukraine had with being able to have enough diesel fuel to get the crop in or anything like that. Nobody likes the price, but there's plenty of it out there to keep the old machinery going here in the U.S. The biggest problem is getting in the field, and that has been an issue in the northern plains and in Canada, and maybe that'll help out a little. As I said this earlier here about what's going on in really the primary state right now is North Dakota.
Yeah, so more rains than expected fell in the US.
Oh yeah, well that the same situation is that the winter wheat crop, the rains did end up hit central Kansas and on into some parts of western Oklahoma and out towards the Panhandle. There was spotty conditions out in both the Panhandle and across that western third of Kansas. But definitely some rains did occur that have not occurred in that part of the world. And so it's a situation where the markets, they hear rain, that's what they're going to react to. They sometimes it's the old game of get out and then look around later and see, well, maybe I want to get back in or not. And I think that's going to be interesting here, particularly with these rain activity shifting north. There was reports here earlier this week that Manitoba still only had 10% of all their particular uh, uh, seedings in and only half of Alberta. I didn't see a statistic on Saskatchewan, but in between there, let's say 30% in that part of the world. So in general, this week is going to be highly important as to how much gets accomplished and that, because I really feel like that if we get another surge of heavy rains like did happen and like we just mentioned in parts of Kansas and parts of western the Corn Belt, it's really kind of streaky out here in Illinois. It was really heavy in southern Illinois earlier in the week. Then it was pretty heavy in the western, northwestern parts of Iowa and Wisconsin. And that, interestingly enough, I was kind of bracing for some more rain in my backyard, and in my location here, not all that far from Lake Michigan, only had a half an inch the last 3 days. So it's still not. The biggest problem is they're not raising much corn in my backyard. So
Yes, and jumping into the soybean crush issue, many analysts think that the crush in the US would have fallen more.
yeah. Well, we had our NOPA number from earlier this month. It was down a couple million before the below the average expectation there. I think it was 169 and a half or so. From there, the number that came out here late this afternoon from the trade average guess from Reuters was 180.5, and that, interestingly enough, the twist of this thing is that seasonally this time of year we have a lot of plants sometimes take some downtime here in April and in May, but we've also had the NOPA numbers. We've had a couple, maybe even three various previous members that are not part of that particular group anymore. It's called the National Association of uh, Oilseed Operators or something, processors, I should say, oilseed processors, and so the numbers are not always as together here as they always been in the past, where it's been kind of a standard 10 million difference or 9.5 million difference. Actually, my average expectations turn out to be exactly the 180.5 guaranteed. It's I'll be surprised if I hit it right on the head, but I kind of feel like that the demand issues, and I think that's part of the thing that helped rally the beans here from midweek on. And I think there's also some technical features going on. A lot of people are using short beans against some long wheat or long corn, but then once the rains came along and that, and they took some profits in their corn and wheat, and that's going to prompt them to take sort of the short beans off. And boy, did we have a rally there on Thursday. From the standpoint of, I think the real key question was Indonesia. Just like we've had with India, there's kind of come along and say, oh, we're not going to. We're going to export. No, not we're not going to export. No, we're going to change it up. This kind of stuff, and we're going to have this domestic uh, amount of particular usage in that. But it looked like as time was going on that particular approach that Indonesia was doing was going to definitely slow down some of the veg oil around the world. And interestingly enough is that on a seasonal basis, the Southeast Asian palm oil producers have their production increases really started way back in late March and April, but in general expands on a seasonal basis out until the fall. And so if they're not going to be exporting it, that's going to be a feature in here too. So that I think jumped into that bean market along with some technicals. We went through some previous kind of magical numbers like $17 and 17 and a 20 levels. And so bang zoom, actually the July has went to a new high of the year. It's not as high as we had back in March and right after the invasion, but very impressive performance from the vegetals.
Yes, and next week we have a 4 day business week.
Yes, yeah, that's always an interesting one. And seasonally, that's the one thing that's kind of a twist on this thing. right now is that that on a kind of a long-term seasonal here uh, on U.S. Grain prices is the fact that between the 1st of March and excuse me, the first from late May and the Memorial Day holiday out until 4th of July. Most of the time, we're pretty well completed on our plannings, and we're just looking at emergence and stuff like that. That's not going to be the case this year, but it's I think part of the reason why we saw some people in the fund investment period kind of looking at that and deciding, well, this uh, we're going to get things planted because of the openness in north, and everybody's going to get all that catch up in 1 week. It's not going to be the case, but and that so they had some people step into the sidelines in that because the fact that plants after they get in the ground and start coming up, they don't need as much moisture. There isn't as much stress on dryness at that point. The one thing that could be a factor in here is too much rain. Again, if we get that, I kind of feel like though that the National Weather Service and a lot of the private forecasters still have a pretty good handle on what could happen this summer because of a thing called the PDO. It's a kind of follows the sea surface temperatures from Alaska down to the Baja of California, and that cold weather through there in the past has been kind of a negative situation where the heat builds up more in the U.S. Central Plains than it does out there in the four corners of the Western U.S., and that would be a huge factor in this thing going forward. But in the short term, we're still not to that point yet on a seasonal basis, but it's out there. And it's going to be quite a situation here trying to get the final bits of the old crop sold and the new crop out here and what kind of situation. Because right now, I got a strange feeling that we've got a very good possibility that we could see this year's prevent plantings being higher. Uh, well, in North Dakota, I want to preface this because we definitely don't have the issues we had in 2019 and 20, where we had 19 million in plantings and 10 million in that. It's really concentrated in the northern area, but it's a situation where right now, if we're 89 million acres on corn and all of a sudden we only have 88, and the soybeans that were going to be 2 to 3 million higher, all of a sudden they're going to be only 2 million higher, or maybe 1.5 higher, because both those particular commodities are planted heavily in North Dakota. That could be quite a significant factor here as to how our potential might be for the U.S. output. Then we have the uncertainty of weather out here this summer. It could really make things quite interesting and explosive. But I have to caution people that the next couple weeks here is going to be, as I said earlier, it's not the easiest time of year where people can have enthusiasm for higher prices unless we really have an ugly looking Tuesday update here on the Northern Plains. If there's not as much planted as anticipated, and I'm not looking for maybe 10, 12, 10%, 12% in corn, and maybe 20, maybe 18 to 20% on beans. If those numbers aren't coming along here, this thing could get interesting again. But the key thing is the time of year we're in right now. We're getting into harvest for wheat in the U.S., and that's normally a sign that the market wants to kind of go sideways to down.
All right, let's get back in check. Thank you.
Exactly. We'll be back next week. Everybody will have a good chance to have a couple days off, and we'll start trading on Monday night.